The opinions expressed in this show do not necessarily reflect the views of the Tampa Bay Arts and Education Network.
Welcome to the Florida Tiger Bay Clubs Election Series 2020. This series is brought to you by a partnership of the Tiger Bay clubs across the state of Florida. Partnering clubs include Central Florida, First Coast, Flagler, Gold Coast, Manatee, St. John, South County and Venice, Suncoast, Tampa, and Volusia County. And now, our host and moderator, Yvonne Fry, from the Tampa Tiger Bay Club.
Hello, and welcome to our joint programming collaboration of Tiger Bay clubs across Florida. I'm excited to host our second program in the Florida Tiger Bay Clubs Election Series 2020 today, welcoming leaders of both political parties to offer their Florida perspectives on the presidential candidates. These statewide events are a result of the hard work and dedication of the Tiger Bay clubs around the state who share a common goal to educate and engage citizens on the pressing issues and political races affecting their communities. In this joint effort, we recognize the need to do the same at the statewide level, and I'm grateful for all those who have contributed to the planning and execution of these programs. I also want to recognize and thank our production partner, Tampa Bay Arts and Education Network, for their tremendous support. This event is being live streamed on Facebook, TV, radio, and websites across the state as organized by our presenting Tiger Bay clubs. As we continue this series, please mark your calendars for the following dates and topics, all taking place at noon. Next Friday, October 23rd, we'll discuss the minimum wage amendment with guests John Morgan, proponent for Amendment 2, and J.T. Corrales of Krabby Bill's Restaurants, who is a representative from the group Amendment 2 Hurts You. On Thursday, November 12th, we'll have a panel discussion on the election and its aftermath. Hopefully it's finalized by then. Today's program is focused on the presidential race, with Florida in the eye of the storm that's raging across the nation. More than 2 million Florida voters have already cast mail ballots, and early voting is just starting around the state. Record voter turnout is expected this year, and the stakes have never been higher. The COVID-19 pandemic, social and racial issues, health care, education, the Supreme Court, as well as the economy are all pressing and urgent concerns for the electorate this year and are driving engagement, advocacy, and the surge in voters that we're seeing. It's also a record year for fundraising. With the cancellation of the latest presidential debate, campaign appearances by the candidates and their surrogates have become even more vital to the outcome of the race, and our state is a priority for both camps. President Trump chose Florida for his first post-COVID diagnosis campaign rally this week, and Vice President Biden also visited here on Tuesday. Both campaigns are in high gear, with what feels like everything each party holds dear is on the line. Our program today may not sway those hardline, reliable super voters, but there are almost a third of registered voters in Florida who are NPA. Without a strong party loyalty as a committed Democrat or Republican, they're searching for a candidate who resonates with them. This group could decide the election, as may women, Hispanics, or any of the other groups in Florida that could cause a disruption in the outcome of this race. Polls are shifting, and to many are unreliable after they missed so badly in the 2016 presidential election. But we know that one thing is for sure. Florida is playing and will play a key role in this election and may well decide the outcome on November 3rd. It's now my pleasure to welcome and introduce our speakers, Democratic State Representative Anna Eskamani and Republican State Representative Blaise Ingoglia. Our previously scheduled speakers send their apologies, as this is a very busy time for presidential surrogates, and they were not able to join us due to the continuously evolving schedule of rallies and events happening on the campaign trail. We are thrilled to have these two distinguished state representatives join us today. Hello and welcome to you both. I want to outline our event structure and ask for each of your consideration of our time limits. We're going to begin with an opening question, which you'll have 3 minutes to answer. You'll have 2 minutes to answer on the subsequent questions. And if you or your candidate is specifically mentioned in an answer, you'll have the option of a 30-second rebuttal. We want to get to as many questions from Tiger Bay members from around the state as possible, and also want to give each of you equal time for your responses. These limits are meant to make sure that you respectfully address questions from our members and that this does not become a debate. I'll have a clock on my screen and I'll let you know if you've gone over your time. Again, thank you for your respect for this structure and our intentions for an informative, interesting, interesting and educational program today. As I mentioned, in the Tiger Bay tradition, our questions come from members of our clubs. In this case, the 10 Tiger Bay clubs from around the state that are presenting these forums submitted questions from their members, and our question coordinators, Tampa Tiger Bay Club board members John Godwin, a Democrat, and Lee Lowry, a Republican, have prepared them for today. I'm going to open with the first question with a time limit of 3 minutes. If you would both please start with an appeal on behalf of your candidate to those NPAs in the state who don't necessarily have a loyalty to a party. Representative Eskamani, would you start for us?
I would love to. Thank you so much, Yvonne, and to all of our Tiger Bay chapters across the state for hosting this really important forum, and to my colleague, Representative Blaise Ingoglia. It's always a pleasure to share space with you, even if it's virtual. And so to all of our no party affiliation voters across the state, and to any voter here in Florida, we all know what can be possible if we elect leaders that prioritize science over politics, who care about people over corporations, and who express empathy and help solve problems versus make them worse. The COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated that without strong leadership, not only will we see our economy suffer, but we'll see people die. And in fact, here in the United States, we have seen over millions, 8 million deaths across the country. We have seen hundreds and thousands of positive cases here in Florida, over 700,000, and over 15,000 deaths. We know that these are not just numbers, these are people. These are our grandparents, our aunts, our uncles, our parents, our sons, our daughters, our neighbors and best friends. We see this pandemic having new peaks around the world, and it very well is happening in parts of this country. And it takes strong leadership that focuses on listening to the experts to get us through this pandemic together. And I have no doubt in the potential of the American people to practice the best safety standards, wear a mask, and to redefine our new normal. But unfortunately, under President Trump and his multiple meltdowns through Twitter, his desire to divide us versus bring us together has really created unnecessary chaos in a moment where we should be focused on getting through this pandemic, restoring our economy, creating new jobs, supporting our small businesses, getting folks back to school, and doing our part to save lives. The other parts I'll emphasize in my last few seconds is going beyond the pandemic. We also know there are many other issues that matter to everyday people, and whether it's affordable housing, taking on climate change, ensuring that we have clean water and clean air, thinking about issues like taxation and fair taxation. These are all topics that our president has major decision making in, whether it's his or her executive order or it's setting the stage for Congress to act. And we've seen complete lack of bipartisanship in Congress, and it all comes from the top. And I know that Vice President Joe Biden has the experience of working with the Senate. He knows how to find common solutions to solve these complex problems and to also bring America into the future. And I have no doubt that he is the best president for all of us, and especially for our no party affiliation voters as you're making your decisions coming into early vote next week.
Thank you. Representative Ingoglia, would you open as well and address those MPA voters?
Yes, ma'am, and thank you. And I'd like to thank you, Yvonne, and the Tiger Bay clubs for putting on this forum. I'm looking forward to defending my president, President Trump, with your audience. Now, look, I know, and I think we can all agree, that we are living in some really unprecedented times in our nation. In the past 10 months alone, it feels like the diversities that have made our nation great and celebrated as Americans are now being used against us in an effort to divide us. Coronavirus, racial tensions, the economy, civil unrest, this presidential election in the midst of all of this chaos. The past several elections, people have always said that this is the most important election of our lifetime, but I think this time around, most of us will say that it rings true. So what's at stake in this election? Our economic prosperity, our healthcare, our safety, our security. This is not hyperbole. This is simple fact. Therefore, who's right, who's wrong? Who's the best man for the job in leading this country for the next 4 years? Both candidates have a record to run on, but I would ask you to consider looking at the accomplishments than looking at promises. Joe Biden has been a professional politician for 47 years. You'd be hard pressed to find anything that he has gotten done. I'm a businessman. And I would be hard pressed to hire somebody like Joe Biden if he was looking for a job in my organization. On the other hand, President Trump, promises made, promises kept. That's his campaign slogan, and that's what he's been doing. Look at the economy, the best economy we have seen in decades. You know, the lower tenth of economic earners, bringing in almost to fix the illegal immigration system for favor of a legal immigration system. Talking about trade, replacing the horrible NAFTA deal with USMCA, making sure that Americans in manufacturing jobs are coming back onshore here in the United States, making us prosperous, not other countries. Healthcare. In 2020 alone, the Obamacare premiums in the state of Florida under President Trump actually reduced by some of the reforms. These are only a handful of accomplishments, and I'm looking forward to talking about Donald Trump's record in this debate. I thank you for having us, and it's good to see you, as always, Rep. Eskamani.
Thank you both. We appreciate those opening statements and for both of you to be with us today during this very busy time. We're going to get to our member questions now. These are 2-minute answers on these. The first one is from Lee Lowry, a Republican from the Tampa Tiger Bay Club. And she asked, do you believe that the perception of each candidate's handling of the COVID-19 virus and their attitude towards the number of cases and deaths have affected how voters have cast their ballots? And if so, why? Representative Ingoglia, if you'd start with that one.
Yeah, sure. And, you know, that's a great question. So if you're a voter and you're actually looking for somebody to vote for based upon the coronavirus response, then you have to pick President Trump. Because look, when you listen to the presidential debate with Kamala Harris, and she said it herself when asked, is there anything different that you would do than the Biden-Harris administration would do other than President Trump? And the answer, she couldn't answer it. And that's because we know that this president has done some amazing things in terms of COVID responses. We've tested 115 million people. We're averaging 920,000 tests a day now. We are on the verge of getting vaccines and life-saving therapeutics faster than we have ever seen before. Normally, it takes 4 years to get these done. We're probably going to have a vaccine under a year. How did we do that? President Trump stripped away the regulations, took away the redundant regulations, but kept the efficacy and the safety protocols in place to make sure that we are doing it. Look, we all know that we cannot lock down this country like Joe Biden wants to do, because that would just cause more economic harm. We know that the only way to do this and get through this is to fight COVID and to keep our economy intact. And that is what this president is doing. If Joe Biden were president right now, we would still be in lockdown, and our economy would be a disaster so much that we would be hard pressed to ever get out of it. If you're looking for COVID response as the main choice for who to vote for, it has to be Donald Trump. Even the Democrats won't answer the answer of what they would do anything better, because they know everything on their wish list, every idea that they have, President Donald Trump has already did.
Thank you. Representative Eskamani, how would you say that COVID has affected votes and how people are going to vote?
Thank you so much, Yvonne. I think Representative Ingoglia and I might have been watching a different vice presidential debate, because I remember Kamala Harris actually speaking to how President Trump lied to the American public and did not disclose the pandemic being in our country when it first came to his attention. And in fact, we even know that medical experts at Columbia University determined that if Trump had acted just 1 week earlier when it came to responding to COVID-19, that 36,000 Americans would still be alive today. And my colleague also spoke towards accomplishments, looking at promises kept and promises made. We already know just the impact COVID-19 has had in this country. I mentioned earlier, 8.2 million cases, over 218,000 deaths across this country. And again, President Trump has been making decisions throughout this pandemic based on politics, not on science. The notion that masks have become a polarized issue is shocking to me, and it should be shocking to everyone. wearing a mask is such an easy step to take so that we can go to work, that we can bring our kids to school, we can have an economy that's running strong while also ensuring the best safety standards. Nowhere in Joe Biden's plan does he want to shut down the country. He wants people to wear masks, but none of us want to shut down this country or this state. But I think it's worth pointing that here in Florida, we are open for business. And yet here where I am in Central Florida, the major theme parks, SeaWorld, Walt Disney World, Universal Studios have still had to make layoffs. And so the reality is that even when we are open in our economy, if folks don't feel safe coming to a state like Florida because they're watching the reporting, they don't feel comfortable, coming to a theme park, then we're still going to continue to struggle and lose jobs. And I think what is very frustrating about President Trump's approach to all this is that he doesn't understand that addressing the health issue is intrinsically tied to addressing the economic crisis. If we can make sure that everyone is healthy and safe and folks feel confident walking into a store or a hotel.
Thank you. I'm going to cut you off. Those 2 minutes go quickly, and I believe that Blaise did want to rebut. Yes.
Sounds great.
I would like to just set some points straight. Yes, the president knew back in January that coronavirus was coming on our shores, but so did Congress, because they were briefed on this. So what did the Democrats do? They chose to try to impeach this president instead of getting together and trying to figure out a response. They chose to have their own presidential debates than to fix coronavirus. So if you're going to cast aspersions on the president, then you have to cast aspersions on the Democrats, because they thought other things were more important, like impeachment, than the health, safety, and welfare of the American people. And as far as lockdowns go, Joe Biden would lock down and continue to lock down this country, because New York, look at what's happening with Cuomo. They're still in lockdown. And now their economy is in shambles. They have a 12.5% unemployment.
Again, those 30 seconds go quickly on the rebuttal here. Anna, last word, did you want to finalize this one out?
I would. Thank you so much. FDR has once said that the American people can handle bad news, but you have to give it to them straight. And you know me, Blaise, I am all for calling out my Democratic colleagues when necessary, but we're focused on President of the United States, not members of Congress. And he needs to rise above and demonstrate leadership to everyone else around him.
Thank you both. We're going to move on. We've got lots of other great topics to talk about. This next question is from Mark Langelo, a Democrat from Flagler Tiger Bay Club. The environment has been politicized for a while now. An argument persists about if climate change is happening or if the measures to fix it are worth the cost. However, Florida has experienced more frequent major storms, which have cost billions of dollars, disrupted the economy, and cost some their lives. What measures can both sides agree to, and will those measures help? Anna, would you start with this one?
Sure, of course. This is an issue that I like to think there is bipartisan support for, but unfortunately, President Trump has not been a leader on it either. First of all, climate change is real. And I will say that it is incredibly difficult to tackle this issue when we have elected leaders who, A, completely ignore climate change and the science behind it, and won't admit the human impact, and B, are in the pockets of fossil fuel companies who also drag their feet on addressing this issue. Unfortunately, President Trump, it checks off both of these boxes. And we've seen over the last 3 years of his presidency, not only President Trump ignore science, but completely dismantle really essential environmental protection regulations that have made it much more difficult for us to take on this crisis holistically, looking at land conservation, looking at protecting some of our most pristine waterways. And even as we're navigating this COVID-19 crisis, President Trump has continued to dismantle regulations with the EPA. Now, to the question of what can both sides agree on, I am hopeful that when it comes to believing in climate science, that more Republicans are coming to that path. And so pursuing things like renewable energy, solar, wind, really prioritizing energy efficiency programs as complementary to clean energy production will be areas where we can find common ground. But again, we need a president that actually believes in climate change in order to do that.
Thank you. And Blaise, your response on that as far as the environment.
Sure, thank you for the question. Well, to answer the question, I think some things that we can agree on, especially here in the Florida, is taking care of our natural resources here in the Florida and the Everglades. This President Trump has committed $250 million per year to take care of and clean up the Everglades. But as far as and look, climate change is real. It's happening, but there are big differences in the way Democrats and President Trump and Joe Biden and the Democrats think. And look, we know that climate change is happening, but I think there's a debate on how much humans actually contribute to it. I think there is more of a correlation than there is a causation. But look, President Trump is right when it comes to tackling this issue. Why should we be part of something like the Paris Climate Accord when we have these arbitrary CO2 emission reduction benchmarks, but we have to hit it? But then you have the world's largest polluters like China and India. They don't have to hit it. So, and then we adopt policies, adopt policies like the Green New Deal with $2 trillion worth of taxes and spending. All that's going to do is cripple our economy and put us at a strategic disadvantage with other countries. And that's why we love President Trump so much, is he's putting an America First policy. He is making sure that we take care of ourselves before we can take care of others. You know, I keep on remembering about Al Gore in 2006 when he predicted in 10 years, in 2016, that the polar ice caps would be gone and there would be major flooding on our coastlines in the United States. Well, now it's the year 2020. The last time I checked, the polar ice caps are still there and we're not swimming in Arizona Bay. The inconvenient truth, the thing that Democrats do not want to talk about and Joe Biden does not want to talk about, is that under President Trump, after leaving the Paris Climate Accord, we have voluntarily reduced our emissions lower than anybody in the Paris Climate Accord. And we did it with free market. We did it with capitalism. We did it with smart management and government, but not with global management and not with mandates from our government.
Thank you. Anna, did you want to rebut on that?
I would love to.
Thank you.
So the reality is that the United States is actually still the leading contributor of CO2 emissions. And so I love the free market as well, my friend, but it's not the reality. We haven't hit a point where we can be proud of our carbon productions right now. What I'll add too is that we know that sea levels are rising. We know that temperatures are getting warmer, but worse in Florida are the extreme weather patterns that have devastated our coastal communities from the Panhandle down to the Keys and our neighbors in the Bahamas.
30 seconds. Blaise, last word on this.
What I have to say to that is that if we decided in 2006 with Al Gore's inconvenient truth to adopt the Green New Deal and cripple our economy, we would have nothing to enjoy and we would be the laughing stock of the nation. Look, climate change is real. We're going to take care of it, but we can't take care of it by throwing money at it and crippling our economy.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our next question. This is from Jim Uvegas, a Republican from Flagler Tiger Bay Club. Why do Republicans continue to call mail-in voting ripe for fraud when there's no historical evidence and the FBI director has testified that there's no evidence of widespread fraud? Blaise, would you take this question first?
Sure. Look, ballot fraud and election fraud is real. It happens regardless of what the media or other people want to say. And universal all mail-in ballot voting is dangerous and it is just a horrible policy. Look, a lot of states, they have problems with their election rolls. You see dead voters, you see errors, you see duplicate people. So all universal, all mail ballot voting is what we are staunchly against. If you institute that, all you're going to have is give Mickey Mouse and your dead uncle an opportunity to vote in the 2020 election. As past chairman of the Republican Party of Florida, I have seen voter fraud up close and it's real. But don't take my word for it. We have the balloteros down in Miami who have done this for years of voter fraud. There are op-eds written in our own Florida Sun Sentinel where people said ballot fraud and election fraud is real. I did it. Here's how. And they outlined how they actually did it. Recently, a whistleblower said that he trained more than 20 political operatives to change vote by mail ballots in New York, New Jersey, and the swing state of Pennsylvania, a swing state that they were doing it. But it goes also to intent. Nancy Pelosi in the first coronavirus relief package, HR 1, tried to institute ballot fraud, ballot harvesting, which is a form of ballot fraud, into our election code. Look, and another thing I'm worried about is Democrats trying to steal the election in our courts. Right now, the Democrats are suing in 18 states. I'm just as worried about them trying to use liberal activist judges as we are worrying about fraudulent mail ballots, which we also have to worry about.
Thank you. Anna.
Wow. Many interesting points there, my friend. So I find it very ironic that President Trump is attacking vote by mail ballots as he has voted by mail. And the reality of what President Trump's approach is, and my colleague is echoing the same efforts, is that they basically want to create doubt in the election process so that the president can claim victory even when he doesn't win states. And fortunately, even today, our Secretary of State has made two different announcements, potentially eliminating vote-by-mail drop boxes at local municipalities over what seems to be politically motivated concerns of doubt in the process. I trust Supervisor of Elections to do an incredible job here in Florida in ensuring our election is going to be a trusted and confident process. And again, to the premise of the question, there is no evidence of this widespread fraud whatsoever. And it's very, very clear to me that the approach by the president to create havoc in the voting process is because he is already refusing to step down if he does not win this election. And that is a constitutional crisis waiting to happen. We must trust this process. We must allow voters to vote in a way that they are comfortable, especially during this pandemic. And it's incredibly unfortunate that even for something as essential and important as voting, our president has made it into a political game.
Thank you, Blaise.
Real quick. So 2 points to my friend, Rep. Eskamani. One is that the president, yes, has voted by mail, but in Florida, as you know, we are a requester state. So universal vote by mail goes out to everyone, whether they requested it or not. And that's the dangerous part. And that is what that's what he's against. And that's what we are all against. And another thing is that you say that and people say that there's no evidence of ballot fraud. There's plenty of evidence of ballot fraud. All there is a lack of prosecution. For some reason, states' attorneys and law enforcement aren't prosecuting these. And probably it has to do with something that
Thank you. Anna, last word on this one. We're going to keep moving.
I do not have the opportunity to quote President Reagan often, but there you go again, my friend. We know all too well that yes, there are occasions of fraudulent voting, without a doubt, in any system, but it's not the norm. And to create havoc and chaos by declaring vote by mail a fraudulent process is undemocratic and not true.
Now, our next question is from William Verhagen, Republican from Flagler Tiger Bay Club. He asked, due to the pandemic, we are seeing a slow recovery in the stock market and are likely to experience a further deterioration in income and wealth between the top 50% and bottom 50%. What specific measures would you expect the presidential candidates to take to ensure Floridians have affordable housing, financial education, and financial solutions for those in need? Excuse me, Representative Eskamani, would you start with that one?
Sure, I can. It's a good and tough question, and I feel like there'll be some common ground on this one too. So one flaw in the president's response to this pandemic especially is that it's a choice between health and our economy, when in reality it should be both. And this question is so important because as of yesterday, the S&P 500 actually closed higher than before the pandemic started. Of course, there's been fluctuations, but the stock market is not necessarily indicative of what's happening on the ground. In my legislative office, and I'm sure my colleague has too, we've been fielding unemployment claims for 7 months now. And Floridians are trying to find new jobs, but they're just not there. And so meanwhile, the state of Florida refunded $500 million, the state's largest corporations in April, which was part of the Trump tax plan. And everyday Floridians had to fight tooth and nail to get a check for $275 a week. So we have a lot of work to do in ensuring that we are creating revenue from means that are not on the backs of working people, while also focusing on the issues that are top of mind right now, including affordable housing, alongside creating new jobs. And so, my approach always is that we need to do our part to make sure that we are creating the best jobs possible, which is why we should be investing in clean energy, which is a part of Joe Biden's plan as well. But also looking towards making sure corporations are paying their fair share, which is why Vice President Joe Biden has already talked about repealing parts of President Trump's 2019 tax plan, because we saw many corporations not give their savings back to workers, but actually give it to their shareholders on the top.
Thank you. Representative Ingoglia.
Sure. To answer your question, we need to keep on doing the same. Everything that this President Trump has been doing, we need to keep on doing it, because obviously it is working. Look, he's stripping away barriers. He's reducing red tape. He's reducing redundancy. He's creating more opportunities for everyday people just like you and me. And the stock market, yeah, is doing well. The S&P is doing well. The NASDAQ is doing well. But that is just one metric. That is showing that the broader economy is working. But what this president has done has delivered real numbers, real money for real people. According to Gallup, 56% of all people say that they are better off now than they were 4 years ago. Let me repeat that. 56% of the people in a pandemic said that they are better off now than they were 4 years ago. Real disposable income under this president, President Trump, has gone up over $5,200 per family. The lowest wage earners have seen, we always talk about the disparity, but the lowest wage earners have seen their wages increase almost 9%. That has never happened under an Obama-Biden administration. It never even come close to that. We have historic unemployment for Black Americans, for Hispanic, for women. And this president knows that the way you boom an economy is that you have more money in the hands of the people who are paying the taxes than giving it to a government appropriator. We need to keep on doing what we're doing because it's working. And if we continue doing this, we're going to have a much, much quicker recovery out of this. What the president says is a super V, and we're all going to get back to prosperity quicker rather than later. If we have a Joe Biden economy, which remember, the new normal is 1% growth, we're just going to have problems.
Thank you. We're going to keep moving. Our next question is from Greg Davis, a Republican from Flagler Tiger Bay Club. When does national debt become a threat to national security? Representative Ingoglia, would you start with that one?
Sure, Greg, and great question. As somebody who has made YouTube videos with millions and millions of views on the debt, this is right in my wheelhouse. The national debt is a security risk about $20 trillion ago. It's a risk now, it's a risk today, it's going to be a risk tomorrow. About 1/3 of our public debt is held by foreign governments. China and Japan themselves own about $2.5 trillion worth of our debt. Now, with that, they can really manipulate our currency and hurt our currency and hurt our economy if they dumped all those bonds on the open market. Now, they won't do that probably because they don't want to lose the money and because the United States and its people are one of the biggest buyers of goods from those countries. But look, the way you fix this is that you have to slow the rate of spending but grow the economy at the same time. And you can only do that under a Trump economy. You need large economic output, and that's what we're seeing under Trump. And with the large economic output, the percentage of public debt as percentage of the overall economy shrinks. You're not going to get that with a Biden economy slugging along at 1%. Look, Biden wants to raise taxes on 80% of the Americans, even the lowest wage earners, by repealing the tax cuts. He wants to take money out of people's hands. You're not going to be able to anywhere come close to fixing the debt problem with a Joe Biden in office. This president knows how to create jobs. He knows how to create the economy. It's the only way we're going to fix the debt problem. But with that, Congress, both parties need to stop spending at the clip they're spending.
Thank you. Representative Eskamani, national debt.
It's important to know that President Trump inherited a strong economy, but both parties are responsible for putting on debt. We've seen this for at least 2 decades now. Now, as my colleague already mentioned, the United States has the most desirable currency in the world, and so that is to our advantage. And there are some economists who say we can continue on this path and pay down the debt later, while others have raised the alarm bells and are very much concerned the fact that much of our debt is held by foreign countries and foreign nationals. So government debt is not new to the US, but of course the levels should be of concern, especially with the pandemic. We know that we've seen the debt increase substantially. And again, this was a President Trump package with Congress that has led to the debt increasing. Now, the notion of Joe Biden increasing taxes is just not true. The 2019 Trump tax plan that Joe Biden speaks to has been incredibly damaging when it comes to collecting revenue from corporate income. And it's so important that we hold corporations accountable to the same level as anyone else. And also, many of the tax breaks for everyday people within Trump's tax plan actually already expire. And so the permanent tax cuts were in place. And we see this in Florida too, oftentimes for corporations, not for everyday working people. It's why in Florida, we have to renew the sales tax break every single year, while the corporate tax breaks are there permanent.
Thank you. Our next question is a question customized for each one of you, but along the same lines. This is from Walker Douglas, a Republican with the Flagler Tiger Bay Club. I'm going to start with a question for you, Blaise. Despite objections in a letter penned by the mayors of 6 American cities, President Trump deployed federal agents for the purpose of quelling riot-related violence. As a party with a history of commitment to states' rights, how do Republicans reconcile with federal interference and ballooning executive power? We'll start with that.
Thank you, Yvonne, for that question. Look, job number one of the President of the United States is to protect the American people. These cities, they're being run by Democrats. Historically, you've been run by Democrats, and you have Democrat governors. But basically, they're allowing a lot of this to go on, the rioting and the looting and the civil unrest to go on in their cities, basically in the neighborhoods that they're supposed to purportedly care for. And they're doing it with policies that just make no sense, like no bail and defunding the police. So they're actually perpetuating all of this violence. And that's why you see it go on night after night after night in places like Portland. But look, let's not forget that Kamala Harris, during for a while now, has sort of been like cheering this on. It's very well documented she's been cheering this on. In social media, she forwarded the link, she retweeted the link, and she shared the link on how to bail out some of these the rioters and looters so they're on the street the next day. How is that leading? That's not even close to leading. Look, the people in these cities deserve better than what's happening. And that's why President Trump, had to step in and take care of it. So here's a novel idea. How about all of the mayors of these cities where all this violence happening and you're perpetuating it? Why don't you take care of the businesses? Why don't you take care of the people? Why don't you keep them safe so President Trump doesn't have to step in and have to do it himself?
Thank you. Representative Eskamani, the question that Mr. Douglas has for you along these same lines is that Seattle, Minneapolis, and New York are led by elected Democrats. This year, those cities fell prey to mass vandalism and violence. What confidence can you give the American people that law and order will be prioritized in a Democrat-led country?
Well, my first request for everyone tuning in is to be very mindful of the information and photos that you're resharing and seeing online, because PolitiFact has on multiple occasions ruled images as being inaccurate, as being outdated. And so it's important that we're clear about the information that we're viewing. And indeed, many photos coming from, especially Seattle and both places like Portland, were not accurate. Second of all, we have Democratic cities like where I live in Orlando, where we had protests and they continue to be overwhelmingly safe. And I know because I have protested with the people on issues against police brutality and for racial justice. And I think it's essential that we understand these issues are nonpartisan, and everyone has these experiences based on their personal identities, and we have to talk about it and do something about it. And that's what Vice President Joe Biden is going to do. He has understanding that communities of color for generations have carried the brunt of racial injustice and have called for action before and haven't seen anything. Now, Democrats have called out the vandalism and violence as well, and arrests have taken place, and there should never be violence, and there shouldn't be property damage in any of our cities around these issues. But at the same time, for the president to our president to exploit them and really fuel racial tensions versus solve problems and address the concerns people have is a lack of leadership. And his management has been an embarrassment to people who are actually trying to solve these problems on the ground and to what this fight truly is about.
Thank you.
President Trump is the first president in a long time to actually put forth criminal justice reform with the First Step Act. Look, this president knows what it takes to help communities. I know he likes to joke to saying that he's probably done more for the Black community since Abraham Lincoln. But when you look at what he's done with criminal justice reform and making sure that Black communities have the resources that they need in order to prosper, his investment in Black communities is unparalleled.
Go ahead, Anna. Yes.
Thank you.
Last word.
If that was true, then we would see more Black Americans through polling actually supporting President Trump, and that's just not the case. And And Vice President Joe Biden has laid out the key steps for Congress to take to immediately put into place reform efforts that would ensure every community feels safe, no matter the color of their skin. And Democrats care about safety. We all do. But we also want to make sure that we're not suppressing First Amendment rights and that we're respecting everyone's ability to have an opinion and to express dissent.
Yeah, but so what's with the rhetoric of defunding the police? If they cared so much about the community, they would work with the police and reform them instead of demonizing them.
So the rhetoric of defund the police is coming from the activist community, not from Vice President Joe Biden or Secretary or Senator Harris. What I will say is that there is collective agreement that if we're going to solve some of these really complex problems, we need to invest in affordable housing, invest in mental health, invest in drug addiction programs, and local cities are having those conversations to say, should we look at reinvesting dollars in these preventative programs that make it easier for police to actually be police and not be social workers and everything else in between. These are
we're going to move on from this question. We've got a number of other questions, and I don't think we have enough time today to finish out even this one, but we want to cover some other topics today. Thank you for your patience. Our next question is from T. Wayne Bailey, a Democrat from Volusia Tiger Bay Club. And Wayne asks, since President Trump seeks to overturn the Affordable Care Act, how does he propose to retain protections for those pre-existing conditions and other guarantees provided in the ACA? And Representative Ingoglia, if you'll start with that one, just because that's targeted towards President Trump, and then Anna, if you want to respond.
Yeah, sure. Look, Obamacare was a disaster. It was a disaster. It has high premiums. It had high deductibles. It was very difficult to see your own doctor, if impossible to see your own doctor, long waits. And look, the people deserve better. This president knows that we have to find something better than Obamacare. That's why he, along with a lot of congressional Republicans, ran on repealing and replacing. And I think everybody forgets that. You cannot have a better healthcare system without first repealing Obamacare. I think everyone is sort of in agreement, not sort of, we're in agreement that we have to protect people with pre-existing conditions. But the problem that we see from the Republican side is the Democrats always want to pour more money into it. And with more subsidies, you have higher prices. It still boggles my mind to this day that many really good Democrats, well-intentioned Democrats, think that we can solve the problem by throwing more money and more subsidies, which is what Obamacare is, and expect prices to go down. It doesn't, it goes up. When you have this much intervention of government into healthcare, that's the reason why we have these skyrocketing prices. That's the reason we need a free market approach. President Trump knows this. The first step is to get rid of Obamacare, which is not going to happen with Nancy Pelosi in a Democrat-led House. So it's working its way through the courts. But at the end of the day, this president has promised everything he's campaigned on, those campaign promises, he's kept. He has promised that we are going to find a better healthcare solution than Obamacare right now. And he's promised that we are going to keep people with pre-existing conditions and we're going to take care of them. Let's take him at his word. Let's work together across party aisles to get this thing done for the American people.
Thank you. Representative Eskamani.
I find it super ironic to call the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, a disaster when there are several parts of this Affordable Care Act that Americans love and need, including coverage for pre-existing conditions, setting 10 essential minimum benefits for private health insurance plans to meet, and allowing young people to stay on their parents' plan until they're 26 years of age, which lets them stay healthy even if they're transitioning in their career. We also know that millions of Americans rely on the Affordable Care Act. And here in my district, I have many constituents that use the ACA marketplace to get their insurance coverage. Now, at the same time, we know that healthcare is too expensive. We know that there are millions of people who do not have health insurance for reasons like us here in Florida not expanding Medicaid. But the prices are also to blame to insurance companies, other middlemen like pharmacy and billing managers who are bloating the cost of these programs and these systems versus looking at a value-based, a quality-based type of healthcare system that isn't about over-testing, but about picking the right test and also investing in preventative healthcare so people don't even have to get to the doctor for expensive services because they've been able to access it early on. And Vice President Joe Biden knows that. And his proposals reflect protecting pre-existing conditions, not politicizing issues like healthcare. And he also has a plan to get to a degree of universal health coverage, which would help to enroll any American who doesn't have any type of health access, which again saves us cost long term. We can get folks to a doctor early on, they're not going to cost us more money down the road.
Thank you. Our next question is from Howard Appel, a Republican from the Gold Coast Tiger Bay Club. And Howard asks, is President Trump fulfilling his constitutional obligation with the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett, or is he pushing it through the Senate so that if the election is disputed, he'll have a conservative bench? Representative Eskamani, if you would start with that question for us.
It's a great question, on top of mind for everyone. We have to remember that as a presidential candidate, Donald Trump made it very, very clear that he would appoint a nominee who would do the right thing when comparing to some of former President Bush's appointees, like John Roberts, who we know on several occasions has chosen more moderate, neutral positions on different type of controversial issues. And very much like President Trump, Amy Coney Barrett is a critic of Roberts' decisions on issues like Obamacare. And I'll be brief with this question. I mean, I think the reality is that the president is pursuing this process very, very quickly because of a campaign season, and this is, from his perspective, a way to get out his a very conservative base within his party that support these type of appointees and really carry strong positions on issues like LGBTQ marriage, equality, abortion access, and other issues that will be decided by the courts.
Thank you. And Representative Ingoglia.
Yeah, of course he's fulfilling his constitutional duties. Why? Because it's outlined in the Constitution itself. You know, just like the late Justice Ginsburg says that a president is president for 4 years, not 3.5. 29 times over the course of this country's history, we have nominated somebody in an election year. The sad fact of the matter for the Democrats, and this is basically what the reality is that we hold the presidency and we hold the Senate. Why would we not fulfill our constitutional duties and nominate and confirm? But ask yourself this question. This is very, very simple. If the Democrats had the presidency and the Senate, would they not do the same thing themselves? But Amy Coney Barrett is a rock star. She is going to be a woman that young girls are going to look up to for generations. President Trump should be absolutely commended for picking someone who's going to be a constructionist and a textualist. He should be applauded for that, not demonized for it.
Thank you. Our next question is kind of an add-on on the same topic. This is from Fred Costello, a Republican from the Tiger Bay Club of Volusia County. If your party wins, will more justices be added to the Supreme Court? Representative Eskamani, would you start with that one?
I would love to. So my colleague made the example that if Democrats were in charge of different executive branches, they would do the same thing. And that alludes to how I'm going to respond to this question, because I think the reality is that if all parties were acting in good faith, then the conversation around adding more justices to the Supreme Court wouldn't even happen. Here in Florida, we saw, under the leadership of then Speaker Dean Cannon, actually tried to completely change the makeup of the court back in 2011, where he wanted to split the Florida Supreme Court, making two different courts, 5-5, and move all the Democratic justices to one court, leaving the civil court open to things like redistricting, tort reform. And many, I think all the Republican lawmakers at the time voted to basically pack the Florida Supreme Court and create two new courts. Tampa Bay Times just wrote about this yesterday. And so the Republican Party spent an entire year trying to stop President Obama's SCOTUS nomination with Merrick Garland, and now they're trying to push forward a conservative justice within 1 month. And many Senate Republicans said they would not have done that when you look at their quotes from 2016. So long story short, I would not be surprised if Democrats did pursue this collectively, because no one is acting in good faith. The Republican Party here in Florida and in Congress has not acted in good faith. And you can't blame Democrats for having these conversations and looking at what's possible if they do win these chambers based on the hostile political climate from their Republican colleagues across the aisle.
Thank you. Representative Ingoglia, would you respond?
Sure. And first, to my colleague, we are talking about the U.S. Supreme Court, not the Florida Supreme Court. But no, we should not be packing the courts. And look, there are people talking about it openly. So the way we view this is that we have congressional Democrats and we have people in the Senate and in the House. They are willing to destroy one branch of government, which has had almost 200 years of historical preference, just to get their way. Look, and look no further than what Joe Biden and his rhetoric lately. He said that, they don't deserve to know what he thinks about the issue. If you're going to have that attitude, Mr. Vice President, then quite frankly, the people, you don't deserve the votes of the people who you're asking to vote for. Look, and even last night in the town hall, we sort of like, well, he's against it, but we're going to see how this confirmation goes. That's not what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to be willingly, openly talking about or nor doing it at all, about destroying a branch of government to get your way. But look, this is par for the course. The deflection that we're seeing out of Joe Biden is par for the course, because it's just another in the a bunch of items that they're just trying to hide their radical leftist agenda, because we know that Joe Biden isn't driving this train. It's Bernie Sanders, it's AOC, it's Nancy Pelosi. Republicans wouldn't even think about it. So mark my words, they'll never think about it. They've already been out and saying that this is something that we shouldn't do, including Joe Biden. He said that we shouldn't do this. So let's hope that he's a man of integrity and he keeps his word and he never does this.
Thank you. We'll see how that plays out, won't we? All the way through. The next question is from Jay Steele Olmsted, a Democrat from Tiger Bay Club. What is your party doing to get rid of the influence of dark money in campaigns? Representative Ingoglia, if you'll start with that one.
Yeah, look, I think this is something where Rep. Eskamani and I and a lot of Republicans and Democrats can agree that dark money is a problem. I personally would like to see a lot of the dark money, all the dark money, out of the election process. I personally think that if you are going to stand up and you want to make a message, be counted and tell everybody who you are. But the fact of the matter is, out of the 12, I think this is off the top of my head, so don't quote me, I think the top 20 super PACs that are engaged in dark money, 14 of them give money to the Democrats. So the overwhelming number of Democrats in the Senate and the House and the President are benefiting from dark money more than Republicans, and that's just a fact.
Thank you. Representative Eskamani.
So dark money and corruption politics were actually some of Elizabeth Warren's leading policies when she was running for president. And I think the ideas that she's proposed are actually really strong ones that can attract bipartisan support. For example, Citizens United is something that has completely tied our hands in getting rid of dark money. And of course, Democrats, as we just talked about, are committed to nominating justices who care about this issue and potentially could overturn Citizens United in the future. More substantive policy changes, though, would include things like requiring disclosures of major donors, bundlers, and finance events in presidential campaigns. Right now we know that there are candidates that are spending much of their time, across not just for president, but across the country, working with wealthy folks that will tend to get political appointments and positions and things like that. And so at the very least, there needs to be transparency on who's giving money and how, so the American people and Floridians can make their own judgment from that. And then also to look at banning lobbyists from donating, bundling, and fundraising for candidates. I think that any type of political influence like that is super problematic. And there can be bipartisan support in just getting rid of this money, because I think it drives everyone ridiculously, crazy to have to even raise this kind of money for campaigns. That kind of money can go towards essential services like affordable housing and other needs. And it pains me to know that during a pandemic, we're seeing all this dark money sway elections when people are suffering in our communities.
Thank you. We've got two more questions. Our last question from a member is from John Godwin, a Democrat in Tampa Tiger Bay Club. He said, it seems like the only time things function in Washington this century are when a single party controls the White House, Senate, and House. Is there any hope that this would change and that we'll see greater bipartisanship under Biden or with 4 more years of Trump? What topic do you think the parties could come together on to make progress? Representative Eskamani, would you start on that one?
Well, I definitely do have hope. That is for sure. I have a whole lot of hope that we can see, especially on issues COVID related, like congressional relief package, that we can find common ground again to get these issues passed, to get relief to the American people. Unfortunately, I will say that everything President Trump becomes polarizing everything he touches. And again, we saw this with masks, something as simple as masks, becoming politicized. This morning, he retweeted a satirical article as if it was news about the Twitter shutdown yesterday. And so he really is creating this negativity within politics that sucks the joy right out of everyone and adds to this polarizing environment. And so I do think Vice President Joe Biden is going to be someone that can actually steer us in a direction of finding common ground and at least having a little bit of peace and to reignite joy in the process. And then issues where I think we can find common ground. I mentioned before, I think clean energy is something where we all should be part of. Clean energy also takes us off foreign oil. So it saves us money with national security. It protects our country and of course is good for the earth. And then of course, issues like domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, I feel like we can find common ground on tackling things like child abuse, supporting our foster care and child welfare systems. These are all different issues that we face every day that should not be grounded in partisan politics. And also a lot of the fights we even have in Tallahassee are less partisan and more corporation driven. So again, if we address money in politics, a lot of these other issues we can also work together to solve.
Thank you for that. Representative Ingoglia.
So this president is willing to make a deal, whatever the deal that will benefit the American people. If it makes sense, he's willing to do it. He's expressed, and a lot of Republicans have expressed to Nancy Pelosi and to Chuck Schumer, let's all sit down and try to get stuff done. But unfortunately, I think that Democrats are playing politics with a lot of these issues where they don't want to sit down and they do not want to negotiate with this president, which means they do not want to help the American people. They keep on moving the goalposts, and they're doing it, unfortunately, for political reasons. Now, I am hopeful that we can get to the point where we're all sitting down in the same room and we can hammer out some issues and get some really good policy that will benefit the American people. But I'm not holding my breath. And the reason is that there is way too much money in keeping us polarized as a society. You look at the news networks, we have one side watching one thing, you have another side watching other thing, and we're separating us. They're making money on separating us so they can sell ad and create that ad revenue. And then whenever a politician or somebody running for office says something, within 30 seconds, there's emails going out trying to raise money on that. So I think, although I'm hopeful, I don't think we're going to get to that point anytime soon because there is just way too money in politics. But look, I will say this, is that in Tallahassee, I am probably one of the most conservative members of the Florida House. Rep. Eskamani is probably one of the most progressive members of the Florida House, but we're friends. We sit and we talk and we hammer out policy and we talk about things. Now, if we can institute a little bit at Tallahassee into Congress, this country would be a much better place.
Thank you for that. And that leads me to my final question. We appreciate you both coming and joining us to talk about presidential politics. In this day and age, that's a difficult load to carry, but we appreciate that very much. But I'd love to hear from you a little bit, both of you, on what you think of the Florida legislative session that we're approaching. The economy, COVID, all of the elements and issues that are affecting us here in Florida locally that you two both have impact on. Could you take 1 minute each and give us a little bit of a breakdown of what you see happening in this next legislative session? Representative Ingoglia, if you would start for us.
Sure, thank you for that. The first big thing, first and foremost, is going to be the budget. We have to decide how much are we going to spend out of reserves, how much are we going to spend, because we want to deliver on our promises to Floridians and making sure that we take care of them. But we want to do it in a smart way where we're not raising taxes and hurting everyday Floridians. And I think you're going to see a continued commitment to the environment under Governor DeSantis and Republicans. We want to make sure that we're delivering on our promise to future generations. So those are the things that I'm going to be looking at for this upcoming session. And it's an honor and a pleasure to serve the people of the district of House 35, and I look forward to continue doing that. And I look forward to seeing Rep. Eskamani in a couple of months up there in Tallahassee.
Thank you. Representative Eskamani, what do you see happening in this next session?
Definitely the budget. That's our main responsibility as state lawmakers, is passing a balanced budget. And so y'all know that I've been very big on unemployment issues. We already rolled out a reform bill to fix the unemployment system and to also make sure that we're not carrying the brunt of this pandemic on everyday working people. I do want to make sure that we have the dollars to go towards these essential crises we're seeing, like affordable housing, like utility bills, and also to think about this point, the $4 billion in CARES Act dollars still sitting in state coffers. Definitely want to make sure that any CARES Act money is being spent in a way that gets relief to people who desperately need it. So we're going to be focused on safely getting out of this pandemic, and of course, making sure that we get our economy back up and running by lifting up small businesses above all else.
Thank you both. Thank you to both of you who've spent this time with us to answer the tough questions from Tiger Bay Club members. It's been a pleasure to hear from State Representatives Anna Eskamani on behalf of Vice President Biden and Blaise Ingoglia on behalf of President Trump. You both are passionate and have brought great information on behalf of each of these campaigns to our audience around the state today. We appreciate your service to Florida and wish you both the best on the campaign trail. Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for the Florida Tiger Bay Club's Election Series 2020. This series is brought to you by a partnership of the Tiger Bay Clubs across the state of Florida. Partnering clubs include Central Florida, First Coast, Flagler, Gold Coast, Manatee, St. John's, South County and Venice, Sun Coast, Tampa, and Volusia County. We hope our Florida Tiger Bay Club's Election Series 2020 helps you be a more informed and engaged voter this election cycle.